Welcome to the Nate KG Podcast, a show dedicated to exploring the nuances of jump rope, where I talk with jumpers of all skill levels, backgrounds, and fitness goals. Usually I interview a guest on the show, but this episode is a little bit different. From the beginning of the podcast, I've gotten requests to have somebody else do an interview of me. So this is the first of a series of episodes where I have other jumpers ask me questions. On this episode, Chad Gonzales hops on a call with me and goes through a solid list of questions. We cover lots of ground, including when to offer advice to another jumper on Instagram, why competitive jumpers don't often sponsor jump ropes, tips on the single under cross, and a lot more. I had a great time doing this episode, and I hope you all get a lot out of it as well. As usual, the show notes can be found over at natekg.com. And now, please enjoy this interview of me, hosted by Chad Gonzales. Chad, how's it going, man?
Hey, Nate, going pretty good.
I am super pumped for this episode. It's fun doing these kind of Q&A things. I think that you and I are going to have plenty of fun stuff to talk about, and I'm curious to see what you've got ready for me.
Yeah, I'm excited. So the idea kind of came when you were a couple episodes ago when I mentioned that you kind of became the interviewee in the episode, and they were asking you questions, and it was kind of cool to see how your brain was being picked on like your freestyle routine and how you were attacking. And you kind of got hit with 3 questions in a row, and I remember kind of chuckling at my desk thinking, man, he's becoming the interviewee.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think just to kick things off where I want to start, I just wanted to give you a little information. You're actually the only jump roper that I follow that I can pinpoint the exact post I made and the exact date that I made that post where you followed me and you made a comment to that post.
Really? Well, I'm curious, what was that?
Yeah, so I looked back on it. I knew I had to actually look back on it, but I remembered the comment, and it was June 12th, 2018. And at the time, I was doing a Fit Fight challenge, and I think it was the most double unders you could do in 1 minute.
I remember that. Mm-hmm. And
so that was like, I think I was at 134 at the time. And that app wasn't huge at the moment, so I thought I had a pretty good chance of winning. And I really hadn't had a whole lot of followers. I wasn't following a whole lot, really wasn't utilizing Instagram to its full potential yet. But you come in with this comment, and it not only was the comment, but you had like this nerdy looking profile picture of a guy in glasses and a bow tie. I don't know if that was you.
No, that was me. That was on purpose. Yep.
That was, yeah. So
I remember that one.
Really weird looking profile picture, and then your comment was just simple, your hand positioning is awesome. And so that right away I got to go, because sometimes you get a lot of unsolicited advice from people, and you got to kind of go into their profile and say, is this advice here, is that a comment legit, does this guy know what he's talking about? Mm-hmm. And so I go to your profile at the time, and the post right then, the first one around that same time was you on like a gymnastics spring floor, and you're just throwing out some insane quads, which at the time I didn't even know were quads. I just seen these multiples and release multiple in a quad, and I was hooked on. Wow, that was really I hadn't seen much freestyle jumping at the time. I was still from the fitness side of jumping, so I hit follow at the time as well, and I think that was about the same time you followed me. So
yep, that sounds about right.
That's kind of, you're the only jumper I really can pinpoint.
Oh, that's cool, man. Thanks for sharing that story. That's really fun for me. Yeah.
And so, that led me to really get big into Instagram. I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, not much longer, that Mike started doing the combo of the day. Mm-hmm. So I finally saw some of the tricks from you, that first post, but then he started putting out combos of the day, and that was my first time actually trying to do some of those weird crosses and things like that. And so then I kind of moved on from fitness side of jumping and over to your side. And so
I think it's a blend too. Like, I don't think that it's necessarily one or the other. I think that because I've watched you for a while, I think you have this nice mix of integrating competitive freestyle skills, but also still sticking with a very fitness focused style of jumping a lot of the time. I think you blend a lot of those together really well.
Oh yeah, I certainly try. So that kicks me off to kind of want to stay on the social media side for a minute. with that, at the time, and I don't know if your mindset has changed over the last year now. What do you look for in a follower then? Are you following, like a jump rope hashtag on a daily basis? Are you looking, just doing my homework, you only follow 918 people?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Yeah, I like that. I'm not ready for that. That's awesome. I honestly, this is probably going to be a really bummer of an answer. It's so random. Like it's the thing is, I tend to chat with a lot of folks about jump rope, and I would love to follow every single person, but then it kind of dilutes what I end up seeing on my feed,
Oh yeah.
At least right now, and this could change, but basically what happens is if I have a conversation with somebody and we're going back and forth a lot, I probably will end up following them. You know what I mean? Like if I get tagged a bunch and this person and I are having conversations all the time, like you and I did, done, But there's also the case where I might talk with someone, and because I talk with them, I forget that I'm not following them. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
I'll think that I'm following them, but I'm actually not. So like if I don't follow anyone, it's rarely on purpose, if that makes sense, But that's a good question.
Yeah, I think sometimes I even get you kind of notice when you post a video that the same person keeps following over and over again. You go, wow. And then you finally look at them. This person likes every one of my videos, and you go, oh, I'm not following them, but they keep giving me those likes all the time. I hit it back.
Exactly. The exception is that with private accounts that I can't tell are jump rope because that's a different whole other ball game, But yeah, that's a good question, man. That was fun.
So yeah, then you talk about growing the sport.
Mm-hmm.
If you look up on YouTube right now, and it's funny because I had this question as we talked about doing this podcast a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I had this question in mind, and then all of a sudden you started posting some tutorials on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of, but the question is, you look up jump rope on YouTube, and it's the fitness counts that are relevant. So you're trying to grow the sport. Why do you think it is that we're not going to see the views, the subscriptions, and the likes? When you try to search the freestyle videos on like a YouTube right now, it just seems like it's living in the Instagram world.
This is a good question, and this is something that I actually spend an insane amount of time thinking about. There's a couple different ways we can kind of take this in terms of getting you. So you're asking me about why do we not see more activity on YouTube with the competitive jump ropers and the fitness enthusiast jumpers? Is that correct?
Exactly.
Yeah. So one, YouTube just a little bit different in the way that it works with engagement. So it's not as interactive as Instagram is right now. So that's definitely a piece of it. The other piece of it is that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to bridge the knowledge gap, because what happens is for somebody who's brand new to jump rope, if they see anything other than a fitness application, it's not going to make sense. And it's not going to be very common for somebody to want to jump in and try to learn it off of seeing a video of you or me or someone like Sunny or Mike or any of these people that you and I interact with on a daily. If they see a video of them doing some skills, it's not necessarily going to inspire them the same way because it seems a bit unattainable compared to a video of breaking a skill down or explaining the differences and slowing things down so that they can see what's happening. And that comes back to bridging the knowledge gap, which is something that I chat about very, very frequently. The fitness videos that we see are very palatable. They're very easy to understand, and they're broken down in a way that most people are receptive to. But something that is more complex, and more complex can be a toad, a cross under the leg. Like that's going to count as very complex for somebody who has little knowledge, So in terms of boosting and getting more videos on YouTube with higher amounts of traction, it's going to come down to being very creative and very aware of what's needed to speak to those people who don't know about jump rope. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
All right. So then, sticking in the Instagram world, how worried are you when you post something compared to, like a new jumper, not just new jumper to jumping, but maybe someone who's new to editing and putting a lot of stuff on Instagram? How worried do you think we should be about followers, views, likes? I know actually some people are starting to get likes taken away, so you don't see those numbers. But
I love that.
How caught up do you think we should be in that? Because we're trying to grow jump rope. You're also trying to grow your own account, but getting those views and followers, you're growing the sport of the jump rope. So how caught up should we be versus not getting in your head about it?
Yeah. So if we look at the long term of how this is going to play out, those things don't really matter in my perspective. I think what matters is being an active part of the community over time, and throughout the years continuing to meet more people and talk with more people and have real human interactions. The likes and the followers are not really important unless you have a very specific goal. And I think that a huge piece of social media that needs to be very, very clear and very front of mind is, why are you there? What are you on this platform for? And if you're there just to share what your progress is and to share and connect with other people, the likes and the followers just don't matter. They're not really a proxy for anything, if that makes sense. If you're trying to run a business and you're trying to have sponsorship and advertising opportunities, it matters how many people you're able to reach. And every single person will play their own part, regardless of how many people that they are connected with, because most likely you are connected to at least 20 other real humans that are different than people that I'm connected to, right? Unless all of a sudden I skyrocket to 1 million people overnight, it's just not, there's just not going to be 100% overlap. And that includes every other person that's on Instagram on that platform, right? So it really comes down to understanding that you can use Instagram for sales. You can use Instagram for a private little community. You can use Instagram to explore and to be entertained. There's all these ways to use this tool that's in front of us, but being very clear and aware of why we're there is going to help determine whether or not to track the vanity metrics, because they can be important in certain contexts, but I think for the context of what you and I are talking about right now, for most jumpers, it's actually not important. What matters more is how many real conversations do you have in a year, in 2 years? How many times have you gone and met up with people who are really good jumpers that you've gotten along with and you've had a great conversation with,
Oh, yeah. I think what's awesome to see, too, is like when I see somebody land something new, they're tagging you or somebody else and saying he helped me with, thanks to Nate for a few tips he gave me, which I can just imagine that, because I've had the same conversation with you on certain things. And I can just imagine the same thing. You've taken, your own time out of your day and saying, here's a few tips. And you help somebody in this online format in the background, and they were able to land it and tag you.
Yeah. And that also applies to everyone else that shares knowledge. I have my own bias on what kind of knowledge I think should be shared and should be disseminated. But the truth of the matter is, when it comes down to teaching, every person receives information very differently than one another. So I might tell you something, and then you might go talk to someone who's just started jumping and got a cross for the first time. And for whatever reason, they might say something or use some kind of metaphor that clicks in your brain differently than the way my information was for you. Does that make sense? So
oh yeah,
and I take the time out of my day to send these messages because I know how useful it can be, because there's not that much knowledge widely available right now. But also, everyone else does the same thing, and that's kind of like the cool part of this platform, is that we're all able to share what we know. And that's kind of I think that's a very unique thing with jump rope. I don't think it's very common in sports to constantly try to share information like immediately,
So do you think, especially for beginners, I don't know that everyone's always receptive for, critiques and advice. They're just on there. They may have, built up enough nerve just to post something for the first time and think they're doing good. And then you get somebody who just wants to say, oh, your rope is too long. You're not crossing far enough, even though they got 2 or 3 crosses. When do you think is the best time to actually go in and provide a little feedback? And when do you think it should have just been a, hey, you're doing awesome, keep at it? Because I feel like I've had both.
Yeah, this is where I've made a huge mistake. When I first started getting into Instagram a little bit more and trying to cultivate more people that I'm connecting with, I would go in and I would drop a comment and I would do the compliment sandwich, right? Hey, you're putting in a lot of work. That's awesome. If you change your hands and do this and do a little bit of this, that's going to make the skill a lot better for you, but great job. And the truth is, when someone's posting, if they don't know you, they don't want to hear what you have to say like that. They're posting. We are posting to have praise and to share and to have a conversation about what's happening, not to be told what to do necessarily. That changes as you build a relationship with someone, right? Like, so like it for you and I now, because we've interacted so much. If I go into your post, I'm like, dude, you are crushing it on those push-ups. If you get your shoulders a little bit more stacked, it's going to help you rise up when you're doing the pull through. That's different because there's been so many times where we've gone back and forth and I said, hey, dude, nice job. And I left it at that, So in terms of providing feedback and tips and stuff, I would save it and I would just go out and give support to everyone who's jumping and say, nice job for showing up and doing it. And let's have a conversation about why this tool is so great. At some point, the subject of how to get better will naturally be brought up, right? And I think that's a more authentic way of going about it versus, I know so many things and I'm really good at this and you should listen to me. Like that's just kind of like, it's not as fun. It's not as enjoyable as having a real conversation with someone.
Oh yeah, and I see it too. Like I'll be reading comments and, oh man, realize it probably took them a lot of nerve to actually post that. They just got a PR and you see some of those comments like, here's how you can get an even higher PR. But no, praise them for what they did. That was an awesome thing. And I've been there, that person who finally decided to actually use the social media and I'd never posted before. And I'm going to start doing it. And then you slowly start tagging more people or using more hashtags.
100%. And yeah, and then it's a good point too, in understanding that everyone's coming from a different place. And if you've not interacted with someone before and you haven't had the chance to have a conversation, whether on the phone or digitally, it's better to just offer up positivity and be supportive than to, and I get when you want to help someone because that's really where we're all coming from. We all want other people to get better because we know what that feels like to not know a piece of information, and then once we find out and we make an adjustment, it's like a domino effect of things getting easier. But you can't offer that up front. At least in my opinion, from what I've experienced, it's better to show up with positivity first and then let that kind of come later,
Yeah, come later and get to know the background. And that's where I saw that comment from you, but it did make me curious to see where it wasn't a critique by any means. It was just I think it more had to do with that profile picture, but it still made me go to that profile and see, where is this guy coming from?
That was not a good profile picture. I thought I was really clever. Like, I thought I was real clever, and no, I was not. Man. It's a good thing it's gone.
It made you stand out, so it brought me to your page, and it got me into seeing, which makes me move on to the next point, to the competition world. It was a world that I still am so unfamiliar with. There wasn't. I'm just barely finding out now. There are some teams in my area, like there's a younger team that does like elementary school assemblies and halftime shows.
What team is that?
I think it's called Just Jumpin'.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
They're not too far away from me, maybe like an hour away from me. And then there are some of the local universities here do have clubs that.
Cool.
And so I am starting to see some of the competition world here, but it just wasn't something I was brought into like a lot of you competition jumpers. So as I think this summer was the first time I was following a lot of those live feeds at the national championships that were going on. And so that made me curious with questions that I think I've asked a few times in the Ask Me Anything questions on the stories, or getting into the competition world. So like the events. When you're on a team, I think one of the questions is like, do you in practices decide who's going to be, does everybody do the speed events, or do you decide who wants to do the speed event, whether it's the 3-minute or whether it's, I think, was it a 30-second one as well?
Yep, 3-minute speed and 30-second speed.
30-second speed.
There used to be a 1-minute speed, but they've taken that out. In terms of when you're at practice, it really does vary between teams. I think on my team, and I think on most teams, it's assumed that you're going to compete every event unless there's a reason not to, which is usually injury or team pairings. So for the single rope events, you're usually just, you're doing it. And then when you start to do double dutch and pairs and team events, that's when you have to start choosing who you're going to be paired up with based on usually age, but it can also be skill level once you kind of get higher up in skill level. I think that can be pretty different depending on the teams that you're on, but that was my experience on my team and in my region.
And then we move on to the freestyle event. What is it? It's a 1-minute freestyle routine, right?
You have up to 1:15 on the floor, yeah. And you have to it used to be a minimum of 45 seconds, but I believe it's a minimum of 1 minute now.
So you guys, I think in the past, one of the other podcasts, you guys touched a little bit on judging. But what would you like to see different on like the judging? And I think before I knew anything about it, my mind was kind of maybe going to like gymnastics or some other events, or maybe like figure skating, where maybe you had to have a minimum of a combination sequence that required multiples, and then maybe a power segment where you had to hit the ground, and so you could be creative as you wanted, but maybe you had to hit, like a multiple section, something with push-ups being towards the ground. But is it really just whatever you want for 1 minute?
Yeah, it is whatever you want for 1 minute in the US. The rules are different in Europe, I think. And well, actually, I know that they're different in other countries. I'm not sure exactly what the difference is because I haven't really looked into it. But in the US, you're free to do whatever you choose. When it comes to the judging, I agree with what Devin said on our podcast a while back. And I've had some similar thoughts actually with Mike over the past year. And that's, I would like to see it kind of broken up a little bit. So in gymnastics, there are certain compulsory routines, and you don't shift or you don't change what that routine is until you get to a very, very high level. I think jump rope could benefit from that in certain aspects, but I think that events that are fully redesigned but fully creative would also be useful too. What that actually looks like, I'm not sure. Devin brought this up during our podcast, and coincidentally, Mike and I have had numerous conversations about a jump rope competition where it's more of a battle style or more of a gamified approach. What that would actually turn out to be, I'm not really sure, but I think separating the creativity from the discipline routine might help things out in terms of the judging, but also in terms of people watching and seeing what's going on. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. Although I'm not super deep into the judging or that aspect of the competition world, so take it with a grain of salt for sure. But yeah,
that's awesome. I definitely want to go see one of these competitions someday. I think you mentioned once about throwing around ideas about trying to do some kind of Instagram competition with jumpers throughout social media. Any progress on an idea how that might look?
Yeah, I was kicking around an idea of a virtual team a couple months back. Now, to be fair, and full disclosure here, I get a lot of ideas all the time, and so I just kind of like kick it out there and see what happens and see where I end up with it in a few weeks or a few months. But I would still like to do that, but to execute it, I would want to give it the appropriate amount of time and thought and care. And right now, it's not the top priority, but I think that it could be very feasible at some point in the future. But yeah, it's still in my mind. It's still on the back burner, but it's not fully fleshed out yet.
So I'm a kid, 8, 9 years old. I join a jump rope team. I think the question I think of first is I show up, maybe, might cost however much per session, and they provide a rope. Where are the ropes coming from? That's one thing I don't see from the competitor is the competitors aren't, promoting the ropes. Buy this rope. I use this rope. There's no sponsorship or rope promotion really from those who were coming from the team and competitive side of jump rope.
Yeah, and that's because when it really comes down to it, I believe that there are certain ropes that exist that are better suited for different applications. Like for workouts and stuff, but the jump rope is really just a tool. And I think that there's ways to potentially make these tools more effective. I'm not the best product designer. That's not really, my skill set. I think there's ways to make ropes better, but the truth is, if it works, it works. And the tool is only going to be as good as its user. Somebody who's very well versed in jump rope can pick up just about any rope and more or less make it work for what they're trying to do. And that's kind of the goal. But the reason jumpers don't really push it is because it's kind of, there's not that many suppliers for jump ropes, and you just don't really need to, I guess. There's just not really a drive to push one specific rope. I'm trying to think of like a better, like more sexy answer here, but like that's just kind of it, It is what it is, and it works, and it gets the job done.
It works. You just got this blue and yellow rope that can be picked out in every one of your videos.
Exactly. Yeah. Mine specifically, that beaded rope. It comes down to preference too. Like I just love the way that rope feels, But it also comes down to context too. Like you'll see me pick up a licorice rope or a long handle rope from time to time when I'm trying out a different skill. I just really dig my beaded rope for the majority of my skills.
So would you say you maybe move away from that as you're trying a certain skill? Maybe a licorice rope might be a little faster rope to refine that skill, but is the ultimate goal to get it on that blue and yellow, that beaded rope you got?
For me, yeah. I especially with quads. My mark of being able to do a quad is if I can do it with my beaded rope. The majority of the time I can do it with my licorice because a licorice rope just moves a lot more quickly. In that sense, it's technically, easier in quotes, but it also feels different. So I feel like my quads feel more smooth and feel easier to accomplish from a rhythm standpoint with my beaded rope. But I can whip the rope way faster with a licorice, and that's usually where I'll start if I'm doing a really tough quad,
I like it. So then you are a jump rope coach over with RX Smart Gear, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Is a little more geared, like, their ropes they use and the workouts they do is a little more geared towards the CrossFit community.
Yeah, absolutely. Just for brief context, Dave Newman, the guy who made RX, started it because he did CrossFit, and the double under was a core skill for the workouts they were doing. He didn't know how to use the jump rope effectively. He would some days have a lot of success with double unders, and some days he would not have any success, and he didn't understand why. He comes from a background of gymnastics training where things are regimented and there's principles of movement. So fast forward 10 years, and he's developed a line of ropes that fit that specific context of using a jump rope for CrossFit, but also applying it to different workouts. Hence something like the drag rope, right? That's not a conventional rope, but it's very, very useful for a workout context if you're really trying to boost the heart rate. And also good for mix. I like them for mix skills too. But yeah, so that's kind of where those come from. Yeah.
And so how much luck are you getting in that side of, being involved in the CrossFit world? How much luck are you getting? Because you're posting some tutorials a little bit with the RX Smart Gear Instagram handle. I think you did the Mick release. I think you've done Toad, and so you're getting a lot of CrossFitters' eyes on those type of skill tutorials. How much success are you getting for people wanting to venture out away from just double unders in the CrossFit world and wanting to do those skills?
Yeah, so success has to be defined first. So I have I separate RX Smart Gear from my own personal stuff in terms of the videos that get published, right? So with RX, there's a lot of trying to test out these kind of videos and kind of put out this information. RX makes a lot of jump ropes, but really the big reason why I'm there is the philosophy and the knowledge. Dave's approach to how to break down jump rope skills and how to break down a double under is extraordinarily unique, and it not only matches the way I see it and the things that I've seen in jump rope, but it's not found anywhere else in terms of, a place where you can work. You know what I mean? But in terms of success on those, the goal is not necessarily to pull CrossFitters into this kind of style of jump roping. It's more to just expose and provide context. Anybody who does become interested and then try those skills, it's great, but the goal is not necessarily to convert them, if that makes sense. But people are very, very well receptive to these posts, and they obviously think they're very interesting. So in that sense, they're really successful. And when I show these skills to people live during a clinic or when I'm coaching someone, and then at the very end they ask me about freestyle jump rope and I show them, they find it very, very interesting, and I'm able to teach things like the Mick pretty quickly to a lot of athletes. So in that sense, it's really successful.
So what about speed step training? So you were posting over the summer, you were doing those live speed step training, in that gym nightly.
Yeah.
What about, those were brutal workouts, and I was doing them right there with you, trying to grow those numbers.
Yeah.
Why aren't we seeing the CrossFit world even utilizing the speed step training? Because even the RX ropes can definitely be used not just for double unders, but for speed step training and those interval workouts, because they are brutal.
Yeah, and I use RX ropes for my speed step training too. I think in that application, they're really, really awesome. To answer the question as to why CrossFit hasn't adopted that style yet, I just don't think that they're fully aware of how to integrate that into their programming, because CrossFit is a very specific style of medium endurance, high intensity interval training. And to integrate a jump rope in that way would require, I think, a lot of understanding of a jump rope and a lot of understanding of different ways to pair that with different movements. And that just isn't something that is known yet. It's also not necessarily a question that I can fully answer because I'm not in the CrossFit HQ. You know what I mean? But I definitely integrate speed training a bunch, and I've paired it with movements like the deadlift or the back squat or, an assault bike or something, and it's freaking phenomenal. And I think that they could get a lot out of that. But the other aspect to it as well is that speed step to jump ropers who are really used to jump roping, it's very straightforward and an easy movement. To people who are not familiar with a jump rope, it can be really, really challenging, to the point where if you're not training that movement outside of workout and you're just trying to show up for a workout, get the work done and leave, it can be such a barrier to your workout that it ends up not being a workout at all. Does that make sense? If you can't get through it at all and you just miss the whole time, well, there's no reason for you to work out anymore because you're not even doing the skill, or if the whole purpose of having that 30 seconds of speed is to spike your heart rate, but you miss 10 times and your heart rate's not spiked at all, that doesn't make the rest of the workout effective, So in terms of adopting those kinds of things in CrossFit, there's a lot of different variables that have to be considered. But the most important is that despite seeming like a straightforward skill, it's actually, there's a lot going on. So it's a little bit of a high barrier in terms of a workout context.
Oh yeah, and seeing it for me, that was a skill that I was able to pick up pretty easily. When I started jumping, that was just something I could just do. Mm-hmm. And for others, it's the double under that, so I have actually interacted with some CrossFitters who they're getting, those 19 point, those CrossFit game workouts, and they're struggling with the double unders. And so their times are a lot longer than they wish, because they just can't string together those double unders consecutively.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. It's really unique. Double unders in CrossFit are very unique because of the types of athletes that you're working with. When you take a minute to look at all the different movements that are happening and the way in which they happen and how they're paired, the musculature of the body changes a little bit to where it actually is a little bit more difficult to complete the movements. And that's kind of the whole purpose of CrossFit, is to be constantly varied, is kind of their thing. And when you do that, it does make the skill more difficult. And from what I've learned so far, and there's always exceptions to this, but from what I've learned so far is that most CrossFitters don't spend time outside of the gym training jump rope. Whereas all of us jumpers, that's our thing. We go to the gym to spend time on these skills. And when you put in those reps, you're going to become more comfortable with these movements, But if you haven't done a CrossFit workout with a jump rope, I would recommend it, because it'll help teach and help you understand why it's so difficult to get these skills done. Now, there are a couple of other unique things, like CrossFitters, very, very common to be able to do a double under but not do a single under, because of you're trying really hard to bound high, and you're also trying really hard to spin the rope quickly. But
not to mention they're using the whistler, the whistle rope.
Yep.
Oh man, and those things are hard just to do single unders with, because they're meant to whip fast and double under, triple under.
Yeah, and unless you have a very high level of rope awareness, it's hard to tell where that rope is as it's traveling around you. And for some, again, it just comes back to the jump rope is skill acquisition. That's all it is. It's no different than, learning to do a deadlift or a squat snatch or, a muscle up. They're all very specific movements. And if you don't take the time to break it down and learn it, you're just naturally going to have a little more difficulty. Now, the exception to that, of course, is that there are some freak athletes who just get it and they can do it and they do really well, but for the large majority of it, that's why you see difficulties in the CrossFit context. But these unique qualities, or the way CrossFitters use the jump rope, is also, I've also seen that in a lot of adults that don't CrossFit. It's actually a little bit, there are some things that are unique to CrossFit, but by and large, adults that pick up jump rope tend to have very similar paths to learning and barriers to learning a double under or really any other jump rope skill.
And it's funny you mentioned those who just have that just natural ability to pick it up. I've seen that just in tricks of the days and the combos of the day that people put out there. Mm-hmm. Some of those I'll spend 30, 45 minutes to an hour doing that, and I'll see someone else get reposted, and it looks like they did it in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, now don't be fooled, though, because sometimes they did spend a lot of time. They just posted, because I do that all the time, where I'll be in the gym, and I probably should change this, but I'll be in the gym for an hour, and I'll work on a skill, and I'll do it 30 times and miss every time, and I'll just get the one time I got it right. And part of that's because it's just ingrained in my head from posting videos for over 10 years. Like, you just wouldn't post something that you missed, but I do think it's interesting to see all the mistakes. And I think it's interesting to watch the process. So,
oh yeah, I think we've seen a lot of that lately, seeing a lot more people post the process, the bloopers, which is definitely awesome to see, their process. And you'll see, first I had to learn the AS before I could throw in the second movement, and so those are the things okay, that's an awesome breakdown.
Yeah, exactly. So
you're walking down the street and see someone jumping rope, what's going to be your go-to? If you're going to show off, what's your go-to combo? What do you want to throw in that you know you're not going to miss and you're going to look cool doing it?
So a couple things. One, I have been walking down the street and seen someone jump up before, which was really strange. That rarely ever happens, but that did happen. Two, I usually don't even bring it up, honestly. Like I just kind of like, hey, good for you, and I give them some props and then keep going. But if for whatever reason someone was to be like, oh, show us what you got,
Nate's a jump roper. Throw him a rope. He'll show you something.
Exactly. Usually it's a triple under combination. Swing, swing under, TJ, swing, cross, open, swing, open, cross, EK, that kind of stuff. I'll usually do a handstand or plus a double under frog or something. I'll do like a little manipulation sequence, usually a toad wrap and a Kruger wrap. Some kind of, obviously I'm going to throw a mick in there. But when I do the mick, I usually do it completely separate from any other skill. I'll just do single unders, throw a mick, catch it, and then I'll wait for the reaction, and I'll do it like 3 more times because people love to see that. So yeah, that's kind of my go-to. That's a good question.
Man.
I like that. That's fun.
I like that because I get that all the time at work. People know me. Chad jumps rope.
The jump rope guy. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, Chad's a jump rope guy. I'm the reason why our gym has more mats now because it's a second floor gym, and
nice.
And it was
that's
making
good.
the people below us have too much noise, and
there
so they had to bring in more mats, and I probably could make commission on jump ropes because so many people have bought them at my work because of it.
You're an inspiration, dude. That's cool.
And so, yeah, I think I do exactly the same thing, just things that I know are going to look cool. They go, wow.
Yep, exactly. And the truth is, no matter what you do, it's going to be cool if you can hit it cleanly, and that's really, yeah, as long as you can hit it clean, you're pretty much set.
So we talked on, and this actually goes with one of the Ask Me Anything questions, one of those standard questions you get, but you and I actually talked on this just a couple days ago because somebody had mentioned something in a story about rope length, and I saw your comment saying, yes, you should always experiment with different rope lengths.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I see even a lot of people who have the skill set, they have a lot of the skills down, and they just think, I go shorter. I need to go shorter now. And that's one thing I think in the back of my mind is, shorter isn't always better because there's times I'm working a combo and I got to go back up in length, because some of those cross movements already shortens the rope. When you're crossing your arms, you have to really cross exaggerated. You're shortening the rope even more. So having an even shorter rope is going to really restrict your movement.
Yep. And it all comes down to context. And there's one thing that I want to make super, super, super duper clear is that your jump rope needs to fit you the way your shoe fits you. If you start to look at your jump rope the same way you look at your shoes, everything changes and it makes sense and clicks immediately. And here's why. A handstand, a push-up, a toad, a Kruger wrap, a mick, and a triple under are all super duper different skills, and they require different lengths as you're learning. And then what ends up happening is once you find a rope that tends to fit you for the majority of the skills you enjoy, you'll find that size that's really nice, but you'll always want to keep experimenting. There's a reason why we all have a lot of different ropes. Like even competitors at the highest level still jump with several different ropes and have several different ropes so that we can experiment and play with something that's brand new. That's why I always have with me one of Sonny's Unconventional Gains beaded long handles. I have my own beaded short handle, and then I have just a generic short handle licorice and a long handle licorice. Right, so I have all 4 of those ropes with me because that covers the gamut for me. And
from long handle, short handle, and they're probably, I'm guessing, all a little bit different in length, correct?
Well, to be honest with you, the licorice ones, they change almost every time I jump because it depends on what I'm doing, and so you start with this general guideline. It again, back to context. What are you working on? You and I right now, we're talking about freestyle skills, which is a specific context. So in that context, the rope's never going to be above your armpits, or in all honesty, it's probably never going to be above the bottom of your sternum or the bottom of your pec height. That's 3 feet plus your height in terms of the cable length, and that's really going to cover you for everything. that's probably honestly going to be a little long for most freestyle skills. Now, to change that, if you're going to go into a boxing gym and you're going to jump like a boxer and that's your style, you're going to have an incredibly long rope, because what happens is you're going to be forced to change your arm positioning. And if you change it correctly, your hands are going to come up to your armpits and not go out. They're going to come up to your armpits. And that's going to be a really functional position for a boxer, right? So it really, there's a lot of hard and fast rules about here's how you do this, here's how you do this. And in jump rope, make sure your rope's like this. And the truth is, the real answer is, it depends.
Exactly. I see that all the time. You see the tutorials, how to size your rope. And that's the one thing that I think is, I got 4 beaded ropes. They're all 4 just a little bit different from each other, especially. And then there are short handle and long handles. And then the licorice ropes, I'm able to knot them, 2 knots. I'm still not I'm taking one out. I'm going to add another one. And then you finally get it, and I find the length.
I would recommend not doing knots though. And it's fine if you do. I'm not going to knock it, but taking the rope down by a specific size with whatever the mechanism is that's clipping your rope into place is a far better way to gauge the length of your rope. And it's really important to know my beaded rope is 7 foot 10 inches. And I know, and I've done this before where I've sized all of my ropes just by feel, and I haven't even measured them, and they've all landed either 7'8" or 7'10", depending on the handle type and the rope type. Without a shadow of doubt, it's just the same. And I know that's my size. The same way I wear a certain shoe size, it's the same thing. So I would definitely recommend, knowing what that length of rope is, because if your rope snaps in half and you have to buy a new one, and for whatever reason it's just different, you know how long the cable needs to be, So
the other interesting thing along with sizing them, because you say you size them all and you can do it by feel, that's also going to include how many beads you have on that rope, because I notice every jumper is going to have that string space between, the last bead and the handle. What's your preference on that? And to explain to some of those people who may see that, what is the purpose of that? Why do you think that helps?
That is feeling for me, and it's preference. And there's a really important point here. And as much as I'm talking about sizing being it depends, we do have to go back a step. And I should have started with this in the first place. If you're just starting with a jump rope, there are certain guidelines that you can follow. I've found 3 feet plus your height as a rope length is an incredibly solid place to start, because it's enough tolerance over your head and under your feet for you to be set. And this is directly RX Smart Gear methodology and teaching and stuff right here. And we've talked about this so many times. But what you're really looking for is the contact point of the rope. Where's the rope hitting the ground, right? So when we go back to what your question was there about, how many beads on your beaded rope, so long as the rope's hitting the ground consistently where you want it to and it feels good, it really is going to depend on what you want that rope to feel like. I don't like having too many beads on there, because when it gets too tight, I find that the rope either twists up or it just feels a little bit not the way I want it to. When I think I have about a foot of empty space on my rope. So if I were to...
and you can see that in some of your guys' ropes. Like, I would remember seeing that when I first started getting into these tricks. I go, man, I can see more string than beads sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure from a physics standpoint what that does. I think what that does is it causes a slight delay in the rope, so it's a lot easier to slow the rope down when you choose to. And it also it gives it this nice pendulum feeling where your handles are the center point, and it feels like the weight is distributed evenly around the rope as it's going around you. But again, it's not really rooted in science at all, but it's more of kind of my perception on that. And again, it's really based on like the way you feel the rope and what you like.
That's awesome. I think that's definitely good for people to hear, because it's just kind of those thought process that I still get asked sometimes is, why the string space or how short is that rope? Or I think I even posted one time, couldn't get a combo down, and I showed a picture of 4 different sizes of ropes, and then it ended up being a little bit longer one at that time that I was able to get the combo, and I think it was because it had some cross movements involved. So
yeah, I mean, as a standard guideline, anything with multiples is usually going to be slightly easier with a shorter rope. So if you're doing a multiple and it feels like the rope is way too long, it probably is, and I would definitely be aware of that. But when it comes to something like a crossing maneuver, especially if you're doing wraps where the rope's going around you twice and it's hooking a limb of yours, you're probably going to want something a little bit longer, or more intricate crosses like a go-go cross, or like something like a TS where you're shifting where your hands are positioned and stuff. Like a little bit of extra length will probably be really helpful. So know that depending on the skill you're doing, it might be easier to nail the trick the first time or to practice it at the beginning with a different size rope.
All right. Well, lastly, as we come to the close, I think I've hit about all my questions.
Yeah, these have been really good questions, by the way.
Man.
I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, definitely been wanting to drill your mind and any competitor's mind, because it's not a world that I came from. And so someone with all that experience, especially that you go into the RX world and the competition world, it's been questions that I've had. And so bringing in the podcast has been awesome. I've been loving listening to them.
I'm glad, man. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. So what are we going to see in 2020?
Hopefully a lot. I have a lot of stuff that I want to put out. Definitely more podcasts, definitely more emails. And I'm really looking to bridge that knowledge gap that we were talking about, add to that pool of jump rope knowledge, and hopefully get a lot more answers out into the world, like these questions that you've been asking me and that other people have asked me. Probably will take the form of video. And that's definitely something that's on my mind a lot, but we'll see. Any way I can get the information out and delivered to anyone and everyone is kind of the goal, Oh
yeah, super helpful. Even like you said, it's that one way somebody explains something that it clicks. For me, like the crisscross, I couldn't give myself a hug. I couldn't put the guns in the holsters. None of those were clicking. It was, for some reason, it was when I heard elbows aligned, even though it might be physically impossible to get your elbows aligned with each other. Just thinking that exaggerated movement, all of a sudden I started doing crisscrosses. When you did the step through release, it was don't let go until the rope was coming back up.
Yep. Man,
I started stringing those things together.
Yep. Exactly. There is one thing though, just because we're on the topic, and this kind of thing would bug me if I didn't say it. the hugging yourself with the crosses and getting your elbows aligned, hugging yourself is a great cue to get you to do it the first time, but know that your hands shouldn't be pointed directly behind you during the cross, because that can throw off the rhythm a lot. You still want your hands to be moving in a circular motion and not pointing straight behind you during the cross. The other thing with the elbows, I'm assuming by elbows aligned, you're meaning your elbows are basically touching in the cross. Is that what you're meaning?
Yeah, like basically like you could draw a line.
Draw a line straight down, they would be overlapping each other. So
yeah,
when the elbows touch, that tends to be a little excessive, but it's safe, and that'll help you get the cross in the first place. But it is a little bit excessive, and I do like my own personal bias with coaching is to efficiency, so the minimal amount required to successfully complete the skill. If you shoot for having your forearms overlap, that's typically still going to get your hands past your hips to create a full loop, but it's not too much, where with the elbows crossing, you're still going to complete the cross, but you're just going to be kind of breaking form a little bit, and it's just a little bit too wide. You just don't need to, if that makes sense. And the reason why I'm kind of being a little bit particular about that is because I see it a lot, and when you're used to doing it like that, it can be difficult to transition that massively wide cross into a skill like a double under swing cross, or like a swing cross open triple under, where you swing it, you cross, and you open back up in a triple. Because if you're going so wide, there's so much that needs to happen with your placement that it can take up too much time to complete the skill and you can't move quickly enough, if that makes sense.
Oh, that definitely makes sense. And when you got, people like me, I'm not going to jump as high as somebody like Jimmy. So your hands got to do more work than the height of your jump.
Exactly. Yeah, this has been a really good conversation. I'm glad that we got to connect and do this, man. This has been super fun.
Oh no, that was definitely awesome. Something that questions that I definitely been thinking of. So I appreciate giving me the opportunity to pick your mind.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for taking the time, and I'll definitely be catching up with you soon.
Awesome.